The internet runs on code.
But code isn't enough.
Behind every deploy is a race against complexity.
Cloud scale, cost spike. AI rewrites the rules.
Tools break, titles change.
This is the world of DevOps, cloud, and software at scale.
Built on sleepless nights.
On-call alerts, silent fixes.
We don't just build features. We build the backbone of the modern world.
This is Run It Bear Podcast. Subscribe. Ship smarter, sleep better.
You're listening to Run It Bear Developer Podcast, where we strip tech down to its core. Each episode blends insights from our expert engineers, the developer community, and the support of AI.
Hello, and welcome to a new deep dive. We're pulling apart something pretty interesting today.
Yeah, definitely. And as always, we're tailoring it just for you, our fellow devs and tech enthusiasts.
Absolutely. Today, we're cracking open a look at European alternatives to some massive U.S. tech services.
That's right. We're talking cloud, email, search,
Yeah.
even digging into developer tools.
Yeah.
You know, the whole digital stack.
Right. And this deep dive, it's specifically for you. Maybe you're a developer wrestling with data privacy nightmares, or a team lead trying to navigate GDPR.
Or maybe you're just feeling kind of locked into those huge ecosystems and wondering what else is out there.
Exactly. So we're going to unpack why you, or anyone really, might look across the pond for parts of your tech stack.
And we'll highlight some genuinely fascinating options that popped up in the material we reviewed. Might be a few aha moments.
Okay, let's jump in. The core issue, the problem statement here, it's laid out pretty clearly.
Yeah, U.S. tech giants basically rule the roost, right? But that dominance, it comes with some serious questions, especially over in Europe.
Questions about privacy, data sovereignty, like where does your data actually live and whose laws apply?
And regulatory compliance, obviously.
And it's not just talk. GDPR isn't just another annoying acronym to deal with. It's a major force pushing for solutions that keep data safe and, crucially, inside the EU's legal turf.
It really is. It's shifted from being a nice-to-have to, for many businesses operating in Europe, a fundamental requirement. You ignore it at your peril.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, it goes even deeper than just ticking the GDPR box. The discussion we saw points out that this shift is also about actively trying to dodge risks.
Risks like the U.S. Cloud Act.
Exactly. The potential for U.S. companies being compelled to hand over data, even if it's stored elsewhere. It's about boosting overall data security.
And maybe supporting companies that aren't just about monetizing every scrap of data, companies prioritizing openness, maybe?
Right. Think about it like this. As developers, we're always thinking about dependencies, right? This is like choosing between this giant, often kind of opaque black box dependency
From a huge U.S. company.
versus maybe smaller, perhaps more specialized European tools where you might get more transparency, more control over how data is handled.
It feels like regulatory pressure is turning what used to be maybe philosophical preferences into actual practical needs for building compliant stuff.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, before we dive into the specific tools, there was a quick note about the UK and the source material. UK services were mentioned.
Yeah, and it's worth touching on why. Basically, even post-Brexit, UK services often still play by EU data privacy rules.
So they align pretty closely.
Often, yeah. They might need to for serving EU clients, or they just kept GDPR-level protections by design. So you often get a similar level of data protection confidence.
Okay, that makes sense. Right then, let's get to the good stuff, the actual categories where these European alternatives are, making a mark.
Let's start at the bottom of the stack, the foundation. Computing and cloud storage.
The big stuff we build everything on. It's easy to just think AWS, GCP, Azure.
But Europe's got its own serious players. And their big selling point, prioritizing data sovereignty and GDPR compliance right from the start.
Yeah, I saw Scaleway mention from France. They seem to focus on security, but also sustainability, which is interesting.
And OVH Cloud, also French, known for scalable hosting, but really hammering that strict EU law compliance.
Then there's Hetzner out of Germany. Often comes up for being cost-effective, right? But also strong privacy, EU data centers.
And UpCloud from Finland. They got called out specifically for high performance, speed, and developer-friendly features. That caught my eye.
Okay, so the takeaway isn't just about compliance. It's also about performance potentially being right up there.
That's the claim, yeah. You don't necessarily have to sacrifice speed or capability. The real differentiator, though, the key thing here is keeping your data physically and legally within the EU.
Dodging those Cloud Act worries we mentioned.
Exactly. If your app handles sensitive European user data, PII, financial info, whatever, this isn't just a nice feature. It's like core architectural criteria.
Definitely shifts the decision making. Okay, moving up the stack a bit, let's talk developer tools and code archives. This hits close to home for us.
For sure. GitHub is the obvious giant, but owned by Microsoft, a U.S. company.
Which puts it squarely under U.S. law. And that makes some people, especially in Europe, a bit nervous about data practices.
Understandably. So developers are looking around, wanting more control over their repos, their workflows.
This section felt particularly relevant. The source material really leaned into GitLab.
Yeah, specifically the open source community edition. Sometimes you see it offered as a hosted EU edition too.
And the big deal is it's open source and offers self-hosting.
Bingo! That's huge. Self-hosting gives you ultimate control, maximum privacy. It lines up perfectly with those data sovereignty goals.
So you get the DevOps features, but wrapped in a privacy-first approach, potentially hosted entirely by you.
Exactly. Then there was SourceHut mentioned, EU-based.
What was the angle there?
More, lightweight. Privacy respecting by design. Complete project control. It's a bit of a different philosophy, maybe less bells and whistles, more focused.
Interesting. So choosing where your code lives, it's not just about merge request features anymore, is it?
Not at all. It's fundamental to security, privacy, compliance. Options like self-hosted GitLab or SourceHut, they offer real alternatives designed with those European regs and developer control needs front and center.
That's a big deal, knowing you actually do have solid choices beyond the 800-pound gorilla.
Right.
Okay, sticking with the dev workflow, how about content management and digital publishing? We think WordPress, Medium.
Yeah, the big centralized platforms. Potential for data tracking, often ad-driven models. The European alternatives mentioned tend to push more towards independence and privacy.
Like Ghost from the UK, highlighted as open source, privacy focused for writers, publisher.
And then Storyblock out of Austria.
Storyblock.
Yeah.
That's a headless CMS, right?
Exactly. And that's key for developers. Content is decoupled from the presentation. It's modular, scalable, built for devs needing flexibility.
So unlike maybe a traditional monolithic CMS.
Right. If you're building modern apps, delivering content everywhere, web, mobile, whatever, a headless setup like Storyblock, coming from that European context, offers a different way to think about it compared to, say, just spinning up another WordPress site.
Giving devs the tools for modern architecture while keeping an eye on compliance. Makes sense.
Precise.
Okay, different area. Online analytics and marketing. Google Analytics is everywhere, but man, the data collection.
Yeah.
It can be a GDPR minefield.
Oh, absolutely. It's a constant headache. So the European options focus more on ethical approaches, privacy-first analytics.
So Piwik PRO from Poland mentioned. GDPR-compliant analytics lets you monitor user info, but, responsibly.
And Matomo from France. That's another big one.
What's special about Matomo? It's
open source.
Yeah.
And it offers complete data control. If you self-host Matomo, your analytics data, it stays entirely yours.
Ah, so you're not shipping it off to some third-party U.S. service.
Exactly. The whole pitch is no invasive monitoring. You own the data, you control it.
That's powerful. For devs, putting analytics in place, knowing where that data goes is critical. Matomo sounds like a path to total data sovereignty for your analytics.
It really is. Okay, shifting gears again. E-signed and online document signing. We use things like DocuSign, Adobe Sign.
But the data often flows through U.S. servers, right?
Yeah.
Which the sources flag as a potential EU compliance issue.
Depending on the document sensitivity, yeah. So European systems are built to be legally binding within GDPR and something called the eIDAS framework.
Okay, Saw You Sign from France mentioned. Safe, totally compliant with EU eIDAS rules. And Scribble from Switzerland Privacy First supports qualified electronic signatures.
Right.
Hang on, quick detour. What exactly are eIDAS rules? I've heard the term, but...
Good question. So eIDAS is the EU regulation covering electronic identification and trust services. Think electronic signatures, seals, timestamps. It sets the legal framework, so these things are recognized across all EU member states. Using a provider that fully complies means their signatures have legal standing in Europe.
Gotcha. So if you're building something that needs legally binding signatures, contracts, agreements using an eIDAS compliant provider, especially one focused on privacy, is pretty much essential for it to hold up legally in the EU.
Exactly. It's not just pasting an image, it's about using a legally recognized trust service. Big difference.
Definitely. Okay, let's quickly run through some other categories mentioned just to show the breadth here.
Sure. We saw email systems, Proton Mail from Switzerland, TuteNota from Germany. Both heavily focused on end-to-end encryption, privacy, pretty straightforward goal, keep emails private.
Yep. Search engines like Quant from France, Ecosia from Germany, offering search results without all the tracking Google does.
Social media messages had some interesting ones. Mastodon, the decentralized network based in Germany.
Right, the federated model.
An Element from the UK. Encrypted messaging on the Matrix protocol. Pitched as a secure WhatsApp alternative. Understanding tech like Matrix could actually be pretty relevant for devs.
Then there were browsers Brave, with its EU-based dev team blocking ads and trackers, and Vivaldi from Norway, feature-rich, privacy-focused.
Bank and digital payments Adyen from the Netherlands. Klarna from Sweden. Offering localized compliant payment processing. Important if you're integrating payments.
Web hosting and domain registration. Sawgandhi.net from France mentioned ethical, privacy-focused, and Infomaniac from Switzerland, high-end security, and, interestingly, sustainable data centers.
Yeah, that's a nice touch. Cybersecurity and VPNs, NordVPN, with an EU dev team but Panama-based. And Molvad from Sweden, big emphasis on no-logs policies, avoiding U.S. jurisdiction.
Digital authentication and identity, Ubisecure from Finland, ID Now from Germany, providing GDPR-compliant ways to handle user authentication and verification. Critical stuff.
Even cloud gaming with Shadow from France and AML services. This was interesting. Aleph Alpha from Germany working on sovereign AI.
Sovereign AI, what does that actually mean?
Basically, AI models and infrastructure developed and hosted locally, say within Germany or the EU. Ensures the data and the models fall under local laws, not foreign control or surveillance. AI built with data sovereignty baked in.
Huh. Okay. And GraphCore from the UK was mentioned for AI hardware.
Yeah, specialized hardware accelerators. Shows Europe's contributing across the AI stack, often with that different privacy or sovereignty angle.
And the final category they highlighted was just open source substitute systems generally.
Right. Pointing to groups like Framasoft in France, a nonprofit building ethical open source tools, and companies like Fairphone from the Netherlands, modular sustainable phones. It reinforces that theme of open source and ethical tech running through many European efforts.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot of alternatives across the board. So let's try and connect this all back for you listening, the developer, the tech lead. What's the real takeaway here?
Well, first off, it's just awareness, right? Knowing these options exist across almost every layer you might touch. That's crucial when building for European clients, choosing your own stack, or advising others. You're not stuck with just the usual suspects.
Yeah, that's huge. Second.
Control. This is a big one. Especially those self-hosted, open-source, privacy-first options we talked about. They give you way more say over where data lives, how it's used, your dependencies. That control translates directly to better security, more autonomy.
It makes sense. And third?
It genuinely makes compliance easier. Let's face it, bolting GDPR compliance onto a platform built under totally different rules can be a nightmare. Using services designed with GDPR and eIDS in mind from day one, much smoother. It's proactive.
Plus, maybe it's about supporting a different kind of tech company, ones that aren't solely focused on data harvesting.
Exactly. Businesses prioritizing privacy, openness, ethical sourcing perhaps, over just maximizing data collection.
So yeah, we've covered a ton of ground, like 20 different areas where European tech is offering real, robust, privacy-aware alternatives.
The case presented in the source material is pretty compelling. Looking at these options helps with regulations, keeps data local, fosters independent tech development. Europe does have competitive answers.
And they're available now?
The shift feels like it's really happening, driven by both rules and just a growing desire for more private, controlled digital spaces.
Okay, so here's something to really chew on after all this. A final thought for you. Given this global push for data privacy, for digital sovereignty, how might the architecture of the applications you build actually change? Like, if you started prioritizing these European or privacy-first alternatives right from the planning stage, from day one, instead of just treating compliance like a patch you add later?
That's a fundamental design question, isn't it? Really changes how you approach things.
It really does. Anyway, we hope you found this deep dive useful, maybe sparked some ideas for your own work. Are you liking these deep dives? Let us know.
Yeah, drop a comment, tell us what you think, or maybe share this with colleagues who might be grappling with these issues too.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for listening in.
And we'll catch you on the next deep dive.